Welcome back to the LIVgreat podcast, where we talk about all things real estate, whether you're buying, selling, or thinking about growing your career in the real estate industry. I'm your host, Diane Crouch with LIVgreat Real Estate Ann Arbor. And today I'm joined by Monica Ahrens, account executive at Vanguard Title. So if you've ever wondered what happens between the time that your offer is accepted until up until the moment you get your keys, Monica's one of the people who make sure that process goes smoothly. So we'll be talking about all the importance of title insurance, how title companies protect buyers and sellers, and what happens behind the scenes before closing day. So Monica, I'm so glad to have you here.
Thanks, Diane. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, welcome so much. So let's start off talking a little bit about how you got into the title industry.
Yes, so I have been in the title insurance industry for just over 10 years now, and I've been working in Washtenaw County that entire time. The sales manager at a previous title company had recruited me to come and work for her. I have a sales and hospitality business background, so she thought I would be a good fit. I hadn't even owned a home at that point. I didn't even know what title insurance was, but it sounded interesting, and working in Ann Arbor sounded like a great place to be. So I hopped on board, and 10 years later, I'm at a new title company and still loving Washtenaw County and meeting wonderful people like you.
Awesome. What was it that drew you to Vanguard Title in particular?
Yes. So that sales manager who had hired me 10 years ago, she's now the president of Vanguard Title. Her name is Chris Cass. She's a wonderful leader and mentor to me. And there was an opportunity to open a Vanguard Title office in Ann Arbor. They weren't previously in Washtenaw County, but they've been in business for over 20 years and mostly in the Metro Detroit area. So I was excited for this new venture to open a office here right in Ann Arbor, and just looking for new opportunities and, growth.
Yeah, definitely. So let's start with the title insurance basics.
Sure.
What is title insurance and why is it essential within a real estate transaction?
Good question. So title insurance does differ from other types of insurance, such as health insurance, car insurance, life insurance. Those things are going to protect someone from something that may happen in the future. Title insurance is different in that it protects the property and the owner from things that may have happened to that property in the past. So when you do go to buy a new property, you want to make sure that someone's not going to knock on your door and say, oh, I have an interest or a claim in this property. And then in turn, also when you go to sell the property, you want to make sure that someone else doesn't have an interest in it that you may have to share your proceeds with, or that you would be in a position where you wouldn't be able to sell the property because you don't have full interest in the property. So we as the title company do a lot of due diligence to make sure we track down the public records, we go through the chain of title and make sure that everyone feels comfortable when they are buying and selling the property, and that they are going to be the true owners or sellers of that land.
Okay, so you're looking back at previous owners and making sure that the property has transferred from one owner to the next owner in that whole chain correctly.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
And then do you also look at if anybody has any debts associated with the property that might cause an issue with that property being sold?
Absolutely. So if you were listing a new property, we would start a title search on the property. And from that title search, we're going to produce a document called the title commitment. And that's going to have certain requirements on it in order for us to transfer title and for that seller to properly sell the property. So for instance, like you had mentioned, there could be outstanding mortgages on the property. So that would come up as a lien. If there were back taxes, that may come up as a lien. If the seller had a divorce, we may require that a divorce decree be presented to us. If the property was in the name of a trust, we're going to request that we review that trust and the certificate of trust to make sure that that trustee has true authority to sell the property. So once all of those requirements have been met, then we're moving forward and getting to the closing table.
Right, exactly. So what does that look like in terms of when an offer is accepted to when it closes? What's the process from the title company's perspective?
Sure. So once, ideally, we like for listing agents to start the title work before they're going to list the property. That's in an ideal setting, just so if there are going to be liens or, special circumstances with that seller, we're having enough time to do our work on things. So let's say you had started the title work, then you get a purchase agreement. Well, we're already going to have done some of that background work on the title. So then we're going to update that title commitment with the buyer's information. If we're going to be issuing a lender's policy, we're going to add the lender to the title commitment as well. And then ultimately, the realtors are working really hard on their end to get things ready. The lender's working hard on their end, and then we get the clear to close. And we as the title company then follow suit and schedule the closing with all parties to move forward.
Okay, you mentioned a lender involved in the process. So what's the difference? I know there's a lender's title policy and an owner's title policy. Can you explain the difference between those two?
Yes. So the owner's policy of title insurance is traditionally paid for by the seller and is based upon the purchase price of the property. And that's going to be a direct benefit to that incoming buyer. And then the lender's policy is traditionally paid for by the buyer, but is being, it's going to be protecting that lender who's issuing the mortgage for the property. And that's based upon the loan amount of the purchase.
Okay, excuse me. So the seller purchases title insurance to make sure that the buyer is protected, and then the buyer purchases title insurance to make sure that the lender is protected.
Yes. And that's just customarily how it works here in Michigan.
Okay.
Other states may differ in how their processes go.
Okay, great. So how can, from a realtor's perspective, what can they do to make sure that the whole process is moving smoothly between the realtor and the title company?
Great question. So I think that relationships and trusting the partners that you choose to work with in a real estate transaction is really important. Realtors generally have, a few different title companies that they like to work with, that they have done successful transactions with. They have good relationships there. And, similarly to with the lenders that you may recommend, the inspectors you may recommend. But that relationship between a title company and a realtor is important because you're putting your trust in us to do our due diligence and making sure all of the title is going to be clear when getting to the closing table, as well as preparing those closing documents, preparing that new deed, and then having everything recorded after the closing. So I think having that trust and relationship is extremely important. And not many buyers and sellers come to a realtor and say, hey, this is the title company I want to work with, because title insurance may be a less glamorous aspect of the real estate transaction. Yeah. We're not, giving them a nice shiny new house or anything, but we are insuring and protecting that property and interest in the land. So it's definitely important for buyers and sellers to be concerned about the title insurance aspect, but I think they do look to their realtors for recommendations and say, hey, I trust you. Let's go with the title company that you like to work with.
Yeah. You mentioned that sometimes there's issues that can, present a challenge transferring the title from one person to the other. Like, for example, liens or probate, divorce, that kind of thing. So let's say those issues do come up. Does that mean that that's the end of the sale, or how does the title company, how do they help in that situation?
Yes, so it is really important for us, like I said, to kind of get that title work started ahead of time. So if issues do pop up, we have enough time to meet the buyer's request for closing time in a good timely fashion. But no, we're not going to try to kill a deal by any means. We ultimately want everyone to get to the closing table and be happy with the transaction. We do have a legal team at Vanguard Title, so some things may require legal review. For instance, if there was a trust involved and maybe there's a number of trustees that we have to be working with, if probate has to be presented to that seller, then, they would be working with an outside attorney to get that accomplished, which sometimes can be a lengthy amount of time, but, we're going to do our work to make sure we present them with all the information they can to make it move as quickly as possible. And then, yes, if there are deaths or divorce or, a break in title, we're going to work with that realtor and work with that seller to remedy it. And also, we have a number of different underwriters at title insurance agencies, which Vanguard Title is an agency that has underwriters. So, not every underwriter is going to insure every type of property, in which case then we may look to another underwriter to insure that property. So I think that is one good thing for realtors to consider, is working with title companies that have other options to say yes, when, maybe some title companies may only have one or two options. We have 7 options to say yes.
Right. So it sounds like at Vanguard, you're going to look to find a resolution if any of those challenges do arise.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I know there's been a lot of change when it comes around technology and efficiency. Tell me how the title industry has changed over the last few years, and some of the different more modern technology that they're using to help prevent fraud and help with security issues.
So fraud is definitely on the rise and has been for a number of years, particularly in our real estate industry, because there's a lot of money being transferred at one time. People can impersonate people with a very similar email address by, changing an L to a 1 and trying to get the wire instructions changed at the very last minute. So those are very scary things when you're a buyer or a seller of a property. So, one thing that we do, as well as a lot of other good reputable title companies, is we're not emailing wire instructions. We're not just sending you that bank account information. We do not want you to send us your bank account information. So we have secure platforms and portals in which the buyers and sellers would log into to receive those wire instructions. And I do tend to recommend that the realtor maybe step aside when it comes to the wire instructions, because you don't want to be liable for that. So, usually you're holding your client's hand throughout the whole transaction, which is your job, and we like that. But then when it comes to getting the information for sending in money back or forth, we just say we want to work with the buyer and seller directly so that there's no issues or mistakes or anything like that. So when we do send the information, for instance, to a buyer for us to, receive their funds, we're going to send it in a secure portal. And then, but they can always then call us. So, Google the title company you're working with. Don't just call the number, that you see on the screen or that you got in an email last week. Actually Google that title company that you're working with and say, hey, I'm involved with this transaction. I just want to confirm that these wire instructions are accurate. Right. And we highly recommend that. We tell realtors to tell their clients that, extra safety is definitely important when it comes to someone's money and their investments.
Right. Yeah, it always makes me nervous when the times that I've been involved in a real estate transaction, the amount of times that you work with a client and you tell them, these are the steps that you need to take and talk to the title company. And then when it even comes to yourself, it's scary. When you're transferring a huge amount of money,
yes,
you get a little bit nervous, and you want to have a company on the other side who you trust to take care of that whole entire process, because it is nerve-wracking.
Yes. And, I will say one thing that you had asked was, how has the industry changed? Back in the day, maybe people were bringing in large sums of money with checks. And we do accept checks when it comes to the earnest money deposit, which is required usually by the buyer, when they're purchasing a property. But the reason why we don't want to check at the closing table is because that check very well could be fraudulent. And we don't have enough time to verify the validity of that check during the time of the closing. So it really is for the protection of that seller, of that buyer, of that title company, and the realtors involved, that a wire is sent, because then we can follow that wire from point A to point B to make sure it gets there, and we know where it's coming from and who sent it.
Yeah.
And there is some assurance in that.
Yes, definitely. One of the things that I have enjoyed about working with Vanguard is their willingness to go to different places to do closings, whether it's a client's home or even meeting in a restaurant or anything. So tell us a little bit about what Vanguard's policy is on closing.
Great question. So our business model is close anytime, anywhere. And the reason that exists is that we understand that people's time and, is really important. And so we want to make it as easy and as convenient for the client to sign their paperwork as possible. So if they're not able to come into one of our physical Vanguard Title locations, we can always go to the realtor's office. Like you had mentioned, we can go to the client's home. We can go to their place of employment. Yes, a local coffee shop. We could even go to the lender's office. But then there are times where remote online notarization, aka RON closings, are permitted, where we can do a lot of the document signing online. And then there is a secure, almost like a very sophisticated version of Zoom, where the closer, a Vanguard Title employee, and the signer are all present on the call. They send in their ID ahead of time. So another thing that we do for security is we do check people's identification to verify they are who they say they are. So they are the true seller of the property. They are the person that is going to be on the loan of the property. And once we kind of go through those processes, we can do online options as long as everyone's comfortable with that. There are a couple of documents like the deed that we do want a wet signature on, in which case we may overnight the document to them and say, okay, it's your responsibility to have this signed in front of a notary. Oftentimes people go to a UPS store or their bank. In the event that they cannot find a notary, we will happily send a notary to wherever they are.
Right. So it sounds like there's a lot of flexibility.
Absolutely.
Great. I've had a
you had one in downtown Detroit. Yeah.
Downtown Detroit. Yeah. And it worked out perfectly. He worked down there. It was difficult for him to get to another office to close within business hours. So it worked out great for somebody to go down and actually sign the documents right there at a coffee shop. So it was very convenient.
Good. I'm glad it worked out.
Yeah. What advice do you have for buyers before closing day?
Well, this would probably be the same advice a lender may give, or even, you as the realtor, but, as exciting as buying a new property or a new home may be, don't just go out and buy a bunch of new furniture to decorate the place, because that could affect your credit. And then that could really mess up the financials for closing, and your lender probably won't be very happy with you.
Right.
And then we as a title company are going to have to work with that lender to redo all the documents, and you then may not qualify for the property if you've spent thousands of dollars on getting ready for it. So we just tell people, sit tight. Once you close those documents or sign those documents and do the closing, that's when you can go shopping.
Yes, exactly. And then how about for sellers getting ready they're thinking about listing their home? They meet with their agent. From a title perspective, what information should they be giving the agent ahead of time? Something that may affect the whole title process.
Yeah. So when people are packing up their houses, we want to make sure that we have the documents that we may need before it gets boxed up and put in a U-Haul or put in a storage unit. So particularly if the property was in a trust, I know I've mentioned this a couple of times, but trust documents can be hundreds of pages long, and people just put them in a box and then kind of forget about them. But oftentimes we're going to have to prepare documents based on how that trust had been prepared. And so if you don't want us to call you and ask you to have to call your attorney to resend it to you, probably for a fee, then we just tell people any documents relating to your home, or if you do have a trust, to keep those handy. Keep that one box close to you. Don't put it too far back in the U-Haul.
Right. So if there's like a divorce situation, if they have those papers, they need to keep those handy too.
Yes, for the divorce decree. And then that also does remind me to, if there were, two people on a title and, sadly enough, maybe one of the homeowners passed away, we would require a death certificate, and then that would be recorded. So, if you have a couple copies of the death certificate, you're going to want to keep a couple of those handy because the title company for sure will ask you for that.
Right. So basically, any important documents that could be needed, don't pack them away. Don't put them in boxes ready to go. Make sure that those are handy. It'll save you a lot of time and effort.
Yes, exactly.
Great. All right. So I just wanted to lighten things up a little bit and ask you a few fun questions. Number one, tea or coffee?
Coffee. I like tea too. Iced
Okay.
tea, particularly.
All right, but coffee's your favorite?
Yes.
All right. Where is your favorite spot to unwind in Washtenaw County?
Other than my deck, probably I do love Revel Run. That's really close to my house, and that's a beautiful place to be. But then I love Maze because I love their chips and salsa. Yes, that's one of my favorite restaurants.
Do you have a favorite book or podcast that you love or you listened to recently?
I am in a book club, and we recently read the book about the octopus, Remarkably Bright Creatures, and it was beautifully written. I also partially listened to it to make sure I finished it in time. So I did half audible, half reading, and it was just a wonderful, loving book. And there's not oftentimes when the whole book club really enjoys it, and this was one of them. And actually, the author, I think it's Shelby Van Pelt, she came out to Chelsea, and she was present for the Midwest Lit Walk. So I got to hear her speak about the book, and they're going to be making a movie about it.
Oh, how cool.
So, yeah, if you're looking for something to read, that was a really good one.
What was the title again?
Remarkably Bright Creatures.
Okay, I'm going to look that up. Are you a morning person or a night owl?
Kind of like a mid-afternoon person. That's when I really shine. But probably more of a night owl. As much as I would like to be a morning person, my husband would definitely say I'm not.
And then finally, what is your dream vacation spot?
Dream vacation spot. I have a lot of places on my bucket list, but I would really love to go to Alaska. That's been very high on my list. We'd love to go on like an Alaskan cruise, and I think that's a great way to see Alaska. But I always love whale watching, and that would be really neat. And that just kind of is not a lot of people get over there.
Right.
So I think it would be really neat to put that on my list.
Yeah, agreed. That would be awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today and for explaining the title process and key important issues that buyers and sellers need to know before they start the move with their agent. If anybody wants to get a hold of you, whether they're a buyer, seller, or a realtor, what's the best way for them to do that? Yes,
you can visit our website at vgtitle.com, or you can send an email to teammonica@vgtitle.com, and we would be more than happy to help answer any title insurance questions you might have.
All right. Well, awesome. Thanks for joining us. And thank you so much for listening to the LIVgreat podcast. Join us next time. We're going to have a lot of great local business owners, not just directly real estate related, but also just generally businesses in our local community. So we would love to have you join us and listen to everything that Washtenaw County has to offer. So thanks again, Monica, and have a great day.
Thanks, Diane. Have a great day, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.